My mom told everyone I dropped out of college. I actually switched to night school to pay my own way. She never asked, just kept telling people I gave up. I let her believe. Then my alumni magazine featured me. The thing about humiliation is that it compounds. My mother didn't just tell one person I dropped out of college. She told everyone. Aunts, uncles, her book club, the neighbors, her hairdresser, the pharmacist who'd known me since I was 7 years old. She wove my supposed failure into casual conversation like it was weather talk. Oh, Madison? She couldn't hack it at State. Dropped out sophomore year. Working at some coffee shop now, I think. I heard this particular version from my cousin Bethany at Thanksgiving 2019, 3 months after I'd supposedly given up on my education. Bethany had pulled me aside in the kitchen, her voice dripping with a kind of pity that makes your skin crawl. Hey, I just wanted you to know there's no shame in college not being for everyone, she'd whispered, squeezing my arm. My friend Trevor makes great money doing HVAC work. I could get you his number? I'd smiled and thanked her. I didn't correct her. I was already too tired from working a full shift at the campus library before my organic chemistry night class to explain the truth. The real story started during the spring semester of my freshman year. My father had died suddenly in March, a brain aneurysm while he was mowing the lawn. 1 minute he was alive, and the next he wasn't. The man who'd promised to help me through school, who'd sat with me while I filled out my FAFSA forms, who'd told me education was the one thing nobody could ever take away from you, was just gone. His life insurance barely covered the funeral costs. My mother, who hadn't worked in 23 years, suddenly had to figure out how to keep our house. The modest savings account Dad had built evaporated within weeks. My college fund, which had been carefully accumulated since I was born, became mortgage payments and utility bills and groceries. I came home that summer to help, watching my mother's face age 5 years and 5 months. She moved through the house like a ghost, touching Dad's reading glasses that still sat on the coffee table, unable to put them away. I couldn't blame her. I was drowning in my own grief, waking up some mornings having forgotten he was gone, then remembering all over again. When August rolled around, I sat down with her to talk about the fall semester. The conversation lasted maybe 4 minutes. She was staring at some fixed point beyond my shoulder, her coffee growing cold in her hands. Mom, I need to talk about school. The tuition payment is due in 2 weeks. Her eyes finally focused on me. Madison, there's no money. You know there's no money. I know. I've been looking into options. I can take out loans, or I can. Loans, she said it like the word tasted rotten. So you can spend the next 20 years drowning in debt like everyone else? Your father wouldn't have wanted that. Dad would have wanted me to finish my degree. She stood up then, dumping her coffee in the sink. Your father isn't here. I can't help you with this. If you want to keep going to school, you'll have to figure it out yourself. I have enough to worry about. That was it. That was the entire conversation we had about my education. She walked out of the kitchen, and I sat there staring at the chair where my father used to sit, where he'd helped me practice for my SATs, where he'd celebrated when my acceptance letter arrived. I spent the next week researching every option. Federal loans, private loans, scholarships for sophomores, payment plans. The numbers made my head spin. I'd picked State specifically because it was affordable, but affordable still meant $18,000 a year for tuition, fees, room, and board. Without my parents' contribution, it might as well have been $1 million. Then I found it. The night program. State offered the exact same degree, taught by the exact same professors, but classes ran from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. 4 nights a week. The tuition was reduced by 30% for students who could prove financial hardship. Students in the night program weren't eligible for campus housing, but that was fine. I could commute from home. Most importantly, the class schedule meant I could work full-time during the day. I got a regular position at the campus library, not work-study, but actual employment, working 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday. The pay was $14.50 an hour, which wasn't much, but it was enough to cover my reduced tuition if I was careful. I'd eat lunch at home, make coffee instead of buying it, and forget about things like new clothes or going out with friends. The day I enrolled in the night program, I came home exhausted but relieved. I'd found a solution. I wouldn't have to take out massive loans. I could finish my degree on my own terms, without being a burden to my mother during the worst period of her life. I told her that night at dinner. Mom, I figured everything out. I switched to the night program at State, so I can work during the day and still get my degree. I start on Monday. She was pushing food around her plate, barely eating. She did that a lot back then. That's nice, sweetie. It means I'll be home during the day most of the time. I can help more around the house. I realized she wasn't really listening. I tried once more. The program is specifically for working students. I'll be able to pay my own way. She looked up briefly, her eyes red-rimmed in that permanent way they'd been since Dad died. Whatever you think is best, Madison. That was the last real conversation we had about my education. I assumed she understood. I assumed she knew I was still in school, just on a different schedule. I assumed she'd ask questions eventually, show some interest in how it was going. She never did. The next few months were brutal. I'd wake up at 6:30 a.m., commute 40 minutes to campus, work my shift at the library, grab dinner from whatever I'd packed, then head to class. The commute home took another 40 minutes, so I wouldn't get home until after 11 p.m. I'd study until 1 or 2 in the morning, sleep for a few hours, then do it all again. Between the commute and everything else, I was spending nearly 16 hours a day either working, in class, or traveling. My mother and I became ships passing in the night, literally. She'd started working at a medical billing office, 9 to 5, and by the time I got home, she was usually already in bed. On weekends, I was either studying or working extra shifts to build up a small emergency fund. I assumed she knew what my schedule meant. I assumed she'd notice I was exhausted, that I was clearly working towards something. Then came Thanksgiving. My Aunt Patricia hosted, and the house was full of extended family I hadn't seen since the funeral. Everyone wanted to know how I was doing, how school was going. Before I could answer, my mother jumped in. Madison decided college wasn't for her. She's taking a break. I stared at her across the turkey platter. Mom, it's fine, honey. Not everyone needs a degree. Your cousin Ryan is doing very well with his landscaping business. My Uncle Derek nodded sympathetically. College isn't for everyone, Madison. No shame in that. I opened my mouth to explain, but my mother had already changed the subject, asking Patricia about her new kitchen renovations. The moment passed. I told myself I'd correct it later, that I'd sit her down and make her listen this time. But as Bethany cornered me in the kitchen with her pity and her HVAC friend, I realized something had shifted. My mother wasn't just misunderstanding my situation. She was actively telling people I'd quit. She was announcing my failure to anyone who would listen. I pulled her aside before we left that night. Mom, why did you tell everyone I dropped out? I'm still in school. I told you about the night program. She was putting on her coat, not looking at me. You're working at a library and taking a few night classes. That's not the same thing as really being in college, Madison. I'm taking a full course load. It's the exact same degree program. She sighed, that heavy sigh that had become her default sound. If you say so. Can we go? I'm tired. I stood there in my aunt's foyer, watching her walk out to the car, and something crystallized in my mind. She wasn't confused. She was ashamed. Ashamed that I wasn't living in a dorm, wasn't having the traditional college experience, wasn't making her look good when people asked about her daughter. Or maybe she just didn't care enough to pay attention. Both possibilities felt equally crushing. I stopped trying to correct her after that. When relatives called to offer their sympathy about my decision to leave school, I thanked them and moved on. When her friends asked what I was doing with myself, I gave vague answers and changed the subject. When my high school friends reached out, confused by rumors they'd heard, I just said things were complicated. Let her think what she wants, I decided. Let everyone think what they want. I keep my head down, do the work, and prove them wrong eventually. The next 3 years were a blur of library shifts and lectures on cellular biology. I made exactly one friend in the night program, a guy named Marcus who was working construction during the day while finishing his engineering degree. We'd grab cheap coffee before class sometimes, comparing notes on how to stay awake through advanced calculus after a 10-hour workday. My family thinks I'm crazy, Marcus told me once. They keep saying I should just get my contractor's license and forget about the degree. My mom thinks I dropped out entirely, I said. He laughed, but it wasn't really funny. Jesus. How is that even possible? She doesn't ask questions. She just decided what my story was and went with it. That's dark, Madison. Yeah. I sipped my terrible cafeteria coffee. Yeah, it is. I went home for Christmas that year, winter break for my sophomore year, though my mother thought I was just taking time off from my coffee shop job that didn't exist. I spent the whole break studying for my spring semester courses and working extra shifts at the library, which was open with limited hours even during break. My mother gave me a self-help book about finding your passion. For when you're ready to figure out what you really want to do, she said. I was maintaining a 3.8 GPA in one of the hardest science programs at state while working 40 hours a week. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. But I just smiled and said thank you. Junior year, I started getting recruitment emails from pharmaceutical companies and research labs. The night program didn't diminish the quality of the degree. I was learning from the same professors, taking the same exams, doing the same work as the day students. My resume was actually more impressive than most of my peers because I had 3 years of solid work experience on top of my academics. I ignored the recruitment emails. I wasn't thinking that far ahead yet. I was just trying to survive each semester, to keep my grades up, to not completely lose my mind from exhaustion. The worst part about the whole situation wasn't just my mother's indifference, it was how her narrative had infected every aspect of my life. My high school best friend, Jennifer, had started treating me differently. We'd been inseparable since sophomore year of high school, but now our conversations felt strained and uncomfortable. She invited me to her engagement party that October. I almost didn't go. I knew what I'd face there, all our old friends, all of them having moved forward with their lives while I was supposedly stuck working retail and finding myself. I went anyway, wearing the one nice dress I owned that still fit, trying to look like I had my life together. Jennifer's fiancé, Tyler, worked in finance. The party was at his parents' country club, all white tablecloths and crystal champagne flutes. I felt out of place immediately, surrounded by people in expensive clothes talking about their jobs at consulting firms and tech startups. Madison. Jennifer spotted me and rushed over, pulling me into a hug that felt obligatory. I'm so glad you could make it. I wasn't sure you'd have time off from work. I made it work, I said, not bothering to explain that I'd switched shifts with a coworker at the library. She introduced me to Tyler's friends, and I could see the quick calculations happening in their eyes when Jennifer explained who I was. The girl who'd had so much potential. The one who couldn't finish college. I smiled through it all, congratulating people on their accomplishments, listening to stories about graduate programs and career advancement. Then came the moment I'd been dreading. Jennifer's mother, Carol, cornered me near the dessert table. Madison, sweetie, Jennifer told me about your situation. I think it's very brave of you to take time to figure out what you want. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. You know, my nephew went through something similar. He ended up getting his real estate license. He's doing wonderfully now. I could connect you two if you'd like. I gripped my champagne glass tighter. That's kind of you, but I'm actually doing fine. Of course. But if you ever need advice, or if you want to talk about alternative career paths, I'm here. Not everyone is cut out for traditional education, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. The phrase I'd heard 100 times, always delivered with that same pitying smile, that same gentle condescension that made me want to scream. I excused myself and found a quiet corner outside on the club's terrace. The October air was crisp, and I could see my breath in small clouds. I pulled out my phone and looked at my calendar. Midterm exams in 2 weeks. A paper due for my immunology class. A presentation on gene expression that I needed to finish preparing. I was taking 18 credits that semester while working 40 hours a week. I was maintaining a 3.9 GPA. I was doing original research that had the potential to be published. And everyone at this party thought I was a failure. Marcus found me out there 20 minutes later. I'd texted him in a moment of frustration, and he'd called immediately. You still at that party? He asked. Unfortunately. How bad is it? Everyone's being very understanding about my failure to launch. I laughed, but it came out bitter. I just had someone offer to connect me with her nephew who sells real estate. Jesus. You want me to come get you? I'm off work in an hour. No, I should stay. It's Jennifer's engagement party. I can't just bail. Sure you can. Tell them you have a work emergency. I considered it. But leaving would feel like admitting defeat, like confirming everything they believed about me. I'll stick it out a little longer. You're tougher than me, Marcus said. I would have been out of there the second someone mentioned alternative career paths. We talked for a few more minutes, and by the time I hung up, I felt steadier. Marcus understood. He was living the same double life, working construction sites while his family assumed he'd given up on finishing his degree. We were ghosts, invisible to everyone except each other. I went back inside and lasted another hour before finally making my excuses. Jennifer walked me to my car, her heels clicking on the parking lot pavement. I'm really glad you came, she said, but there was something hollow in her voice. Congratulations again. Tyler seems great. He is. She paused, fidgeting with her engagement ring. Madison, I need to ask you something. Are you okay? Like, really okay? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? It's just. You seem so tired all the time. And I know things have been hard since your dad died and you had to leave school. I worry about you. Had to leave school. Even Jennifer, my best friend for 7 years, believed it. I could have corrected her. I could have explained everything right there in the parking lot. But I was so exhausted, and the thought of justifying myself one more time felt impossible. I'm fine, I said instead. Just working a lot. If you ever need anything, I'm here. I know we haven't been as close lately, but you're still one of my best friends. We hugged goodbye, and I drove home crying. Not because I was sad, exactly, but because the weight of being misunderstood by everyone I knew had become almost unbearable. When I got home that night, my mother was already asleep. I sat at the kitchen table with my immunology textbook, trying to focus on T-cell activation pathways, but the words kept blurring together. My phone buzzed. A text from my Aunt Patricia. Jennifer told me about the party. I'm glad you're getting out and socializing. It's important to maintain friendships even when life gets difficult. Even when life gets difficult. Like my life was some sad, stagnant thing that I was just enduring rather than actively building. I turned off my phone and studied until 3 in the morning, fueled by spite and stubbornness. The holidays that year were especially difficult. My mother hosted Christmas Eve dinner, and relatives descended on our house with their questions and their pity. My cousin Ryan, the one with the supposedly successful landscaping business, cornered me in the living room. Hey, Madison. Uncle Derek said you might be interested in learning the business side of landscaping. I'm looking for someone to help with invoicing and customer relations. Pay's not bad, and you wouldn't have to do the physical labor. Thanks, Ryan, but I'm not looking for a job right now. Really? I thought. He looked confused. Mom said you were working at a coffee shop? Your mom heard wrong. He shrugged. Well, if you change your mind, let me know. Family discount on the starting wage. I smiled tightly and excused myself. My grandmother pulled me aside later, her papery hands gripping mine. She was 92 and sharp as ever, her eyes missing nothing. Your mother says you left college, she said bluntly. Is that true? Finally, someone asking me directly. No, Grandma. I'm still enrolled. I switched to a different program so I could work during the day. Her eyes narrowed. Then why is everyone saying you quit? Because Mom told them that, and I stopped trying to correct it. Why would you do that? The question hung there. Why had I let it go on for so long? Why hadn't I shouted the truth from the rooftops, forced everyone to acknowledge what I was actually doing? I guess I wanted to see if anyone would bother to ask, I said quietly. If anyone cared enough to check if the story they'd been told was true. Grandma squeezed my hands. And they didn't. No. They didn't. She looked at me for a long moment, something like understanding in her weathered face. Your grandfather worked nights at the steel mill while he got his teaching certificate. Everyone told him he was wasting his time, that he should just stick with the mill. But he did it anyway. I didn't know that. Most people don't. He didn't talk about it much. Just did the work and let the results speak for themselves. She patted my hand. You're more like him than you know. Stubborn as hell and twice as determined. It was the first time anyone in my family had said something that felt like genuine recognition. I hugged her tight, feeling something in my chest unclench slightly. Thank you, Grandma. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you graduate and prove all these idiots wrong. I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in weeks. But even that small moment of validation couldn't completely counteract the accumulated weight of everyone else's misconceptions. I drove back to campus after Christmas feeling hollowed out, like I was running on fumes. Spring semester of junior year nearly broke me. I took advanced molecular biology, biochemistry 2, and genetics, 3 of the hardest courses in my program, all while working full-time. I was getting 4 hours of sleep a night if I was lucky. I started keeping energy drinks in my locker at the library, downing them between shelving books and helping undergrads find research materials. One night in February, I fell asleep during my genetics lecture. Just completely passed out in my seat. I woke up to Marcus shaking my shoulder, the classroom empty except for us. You okay? He asked. How long was I out? 20 minutes. Professor Chen packed up and left. I told her you'd been up all night with a family emergency. I rubbed my face. I can't keep doing this. Yeah, you can. You're almost there. 1 more year. 1 more year feels impossible. Marcus sat down next to me. You want to know what keeps me going? What? Spite. Pure, undiluted spite. Every time someone tells me I should just get my contractor's license, every time my dad says I'm wasting my time, I think about walking across that graduation stage. I think about proving every single one of them wrong. I understood that. Spite had been my fuel for almost 2 years. You ever wonder if it's worth it? I asked. Like, maybe they're right. Maybe we're killing ourselves for a piece of paper that won't even matter. It matters, Marcus said firmly. Not because of the paper. Because we said we'd do it, and we're doing it. Because they said we couldn't, and we are anyway. He was right. I knew he was right. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were 2 different things. I made it through that semester by the skin of my teeth. My grades stayed high, but the cost was steep. I stopped answering calls from friends. I lived on instant ramen and whatever free food I could find at campus events. I developed a twitch in my left eye that wouldn't go away. My mother noticed I was losing weight but attributed it to stress from work. She never asked what kind of work, never wondered why I was so exhausted all the time. She was wrapped up in her own life, her own grief, her own version of reality where her daughter had given up on education. Summer came as a relief. Lighter course load, just 2 classes to stay on track. I picked up extra shifts at the library, banking money for senior year. I spent my days in the cool quiet of the stacks, my nights in overheated classrooms, and my weekends studying at coffee shops where nobody knew me. It was lonely. Desperately, achingly lonely. But I'd gotten used to loneliness by then. It felt like an old friend. My mother's narrative about me had calcified by then. At family gatherings, she'd talk about how I was finding myself or taking a non-traditional path. She never mentioned that she saw me leaving the house with textbooks, or that I was clearly exhausted all the time, or that my bedroom was covered in molecular diagrams and chemical equations. She saw what she wanted to see. Or maybe she just didn't see me at all. Senior year, I applied for and received a research grant to work with one of my professors, Dr. Sarah Brennan, on a project studying antibiotic resistance and hospital-acquired infections. The grant was competitive, only 5 students across the entire university received it. I'd have to squeeze the research hours into my already impossible schedule, but it was exactly the kind of experience that would matter for graduate school applications. Dr. Brennan pulled me aside after class one night. "Madison, I have to ask. Why are you in the night program? Your grades are exceptional. You could easily transfer back to the day schedule." "I work full-time to pay my tuition," I said simply. She studied me for a moment. "No family support?" "My dad died. My mom needs financial help. It's just how things worked out." "And you're managing research on top of everything else?" "I'll make it work." She shook her head slowly. "You're one of the hardest working students I've ever taught. I hope you know that." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just nodded. Praise felt foreign after years of my mother's indifference and my relatives' pity. The research was grueling but fascinating. I'd spend my lunch breaks at the lab when I could, and I'd stay after my night classes sometimes until 2 a.m., running experiments and analyzing data. My body ran on coffee and stubbornness. I barely saw my mother at all by that point. Our relationship had winnowed down to occasional awkward dinners and her persistent assumption that I was wasting my life. When I'd mention something about my work at the university, she'd smile vaguely and change the subject. The week before graduation, she asked what I was planning to do with myself now that you're done with your library job. "I'm graduating, Mom." "Oh, you finished those classes? That's nice." "I'm getting my degree. Bachelor of Science in Microbiology. Same degree I started working toward 4 years ago." She blinked at me. "You mean you actually stayed in school this whole time?" The question hung there between us. 4 years of telling everyone I'd dropped out, and she genuinely seemed surprised to learn I'd finished. "Yes, Mom. I stayed in school. I told you about the night program. I've been working toward this degree since sophomore year." "Well," she fiddled with her coffee cup, "you could have told me you were close to graduating." "I would have. I could have." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I didn't help her. I waited, watching her realize in real time what she'd done, how thoroughly she dismissed me. "Are you having a ceremony?" she finally asked. "Yes. Next Saturday at 2 p.m. I suppose I should come then." I suppose I should come. Like it was a mild obligation, like attending your only child's college graduation was something you penciled in if you didn't have anything better to do. "You don't have to," I said. I meant it. She flinched slightly. "Madison, don't be like that. Of course I'll be there." I graduated with honors. My name was called, I walked across the stage, and I shook hands with the dean. My mother was somewhere in the audience of thousands. I'd given her a ticket, but I didn't look for her face. Marcus was there, graduating with his engineering degree. We found each other afterward and took a photo together, 2 people who'd done it the hard way. My mother found me in the crowd afterward. "Congratulations, sweetie. I'm very proud of you." The words were hollow. She'd earned the right to say them years ago, back when she could have asked questions or shown interest or done literally anything to acknowledge what I was doing. Now they just felt like lines from a script. "Thanks," I said. "Should we go to dinner to celebrate?" "I have plans with friends from the program." I didn't, but I couldn't stomach the idea of sitting across from her, pretending this was normal. She looked hurt. "Oh. Well, maybe tomorrow?" "I'm pretty busy. I start my new job on Monday." "New job?" Research position at Merrick Pharmaceuticals. I accepted their offer last month. Her eyes widened. A pharmaceutical company? Madison, that's wonderful. Why didn't you tell me? Because you never asked. Because you decided 4 years ago that I was a failure and never bothered to update your assumptions. Because telling you anything about my life has felt pointless since Dad died. It didn't come up, I said instead. I moved out 2 weeks later. Merrick was in the next state over, and they'd helped me find an apartment near their research facility. I packed my things while my mother was at work, leaving a note on the kitchen table with my new address and phone number. The distance was good. I needed space from her disappointment, from her version of me that had never matched reality. I called her every few weeks, keeping the conversations brief and superficial. She asked about my job sometimes, though she never seemed to really understand what I did. I didn't try to explain. I settled into my new life. The job was demanding but exciting. I was contributing to real research that might actually help people. I made friends with my colleagues, went on dates occasionally, and slowly built a life that felt like mine. I thought that was the end of the story. My mother had missed out on witnessing my accomplishments because of her own willful ignorance, and that was just how things were. I'd made peace with it, or at least I thought I had. Then, 18 months after graduation, I got an email from State's Alumni Relations Office. Dear Madison, it began. We would like to feature you in our upcoming Alumni Spotlight for the quarterly magazine. Your work on antibiotic resistance, combined with your story as a non-traditional student who worked full-time while earning your degree, represents exactly the kind of resilience and dedication we want to highlight to current students. They wanted to interview me. They wanted to photograph me in Merrick's lab. They wanted to write about how I'd switched to the night program after my father's death and put myself through school while helping support my family. I almost deleted the email. The last thing I wanted was attention. But then I thought about Marcus, about all the other students grinding through the night program, feeling invisible and exhausted. Maybe reading about someone who'd made it through would help them. I agreed to the interview. The journalist they sent was a recent graduate named Amy Chen. She met me at Merrick's facility on a Friday afternoon, armed with a notebook and a good camera. We talked for 2 hours. I told her about losing my dad, about discovering the night program, about working at the library and studying until 2 a.m. and surviving on determination and cheap coffee. Did your family support your decision? Amy asked. I paused. My mother was dealing with her own grief. She didn't really understand what I was doing. Amy's expression shifted slightly. She clearly heard what I wasn't saying. But she just nodded and wrote something down. The photographer took pictures of me in the lab, pipetting samples and examining bacterial cultures. I felt ridiculous and self-conscious, but they seemed pleased with the shots. This is going to be a great piece, Amy said as she was packing up. Your story is really inspiring. I just did what I had to do, I said. That's exactly what makes it inspiring. The magazine came out 6 weeks later. I'd honestly almost forgotten about it until my former professor, Dr. Brennan, texted me a photo of the cover. There I was, in my white lab coat, holding up a petri dish and actually smiling. The headline read, Against All Odds, Madison Porter's Journey from Night Student to Pharmaceutical Researcher. The article was 4 pages long. Amy had written beautifully about my father's death, about the financial hardship, about choosing the night program so I wouldn't drown in debt. There were quotes from Dr. Brennan about my research and work ethic. There were statistics about how many students struggled to afford college, about how programs like the night school made education accessible. And there was a section about family resilience, about how I'd help support my mother while still pursuing my dreams. I read that part 3 times, feeling sick. The article made it sound like my mother and I had been a team, working together to overcome tragedy. It was generous in a way I hadn't earned, or rather, in a way she hadn't earned. The magazine went out to every state alumni, all 200,000 of them. It was posted on the university's website. It was shared on their social media. Within a day, my phone started buzzing. Former classmates from high school messaged me, congratulating me. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years sent texts and emails. My Aunt Patricia called, crying, saying she was so proud of me and so sorry she hadn't understood what I was going through. Your mother must be over the moon, Patricia said. I can't imagine how proud she must be. I didn't know how to respond to that. Then my cousin Bethany texted, Madison, I just read your article. I feel terrible. Your mom told us all you dropped out and were working at a coffee shop. I had no idea you were killing yourself to stay in school. I'm so sorry I was condescending to you. You're amazing. That message was followed by a dozen more from other relatives. They'd all believed my mother's version of events. They'd all pitied me, thought I was a failure, offered unsolicited advice about trade schools and alternative careers. And now they were all finding out the truth. My mother called me on a Tuesday evening. I was at my apartment, eating takeout and reviewing research data. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Madison. Her voice was tight. I need to talk to you about this article. Okay. Everyone has been calling me. Everyone. My entire book club saw it. Your Uncle Derek sent me a copy. Patricia won't stop texting me. I waited. They all think. She paused. They're all asking why I never told them you were still in school. They think I've been lying to them for years. Haven't you? The words came out sharper than I'd intended. Silence on the other end. Then, I didn't know, Madison. You never told me you were doing all of this. I did tell you. When I enrolled in the night program, I told you. You said that's nice, sweetie, and went back to not paying attention. That's not fair. Isn't it? I set down my fork. I spent 4 years working 40-hour weeks and taking a full course load. I came home exhausted every single night. I had textbooks all over my room. I was clearly doing something. But you decided I'd quit, and you told everyone that story, and you never once bothered to ask if it was true. I was grieving your father. I wasn't paying attention to every detail of, it wasn't a detail, Mom. It was my entire life. And you couldn't be bothered to see it. Another long silence. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. I didn't want to see it. That stopped me. What? I didn't want to see you struggling like that. Working yourself to death, barely sleeping. It reminded me too much of your father, how hard he worked to provide for us. And then he just died. For nothing. Her voice cracked. I couldn't watch you do the same thing. I closed my eyes. This was the first real thing she'd said to me in years, and I didn't know what to do with it. So instead you pretended I'd given up? I asked quietly. I told myself you were taking a break, figuring things out. It was easier than watching you kill yourself for a degree. That wasn't your choice to make, Mom. You don't get to rewrite my life because the real version makes you uncomfortable. I know. She was crying now. I know, Madison. I've been a terrible mother. I couldn't handle losing anyone else. So I stopped looking. I stopped seeing you. The anger I'd been carrying for years started to crack. Underneath it was something more complicated, grief and sadness and a kind of lonely exhaustion. You didn't lose me, I said. I was right there. Working my ass off, trying to make Dad proud, trying to make something of myself. I was right there, and you looked away. I'm sorry, she sobbed it. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. You did such an incredible thing, and I missed all of it. I let everyone think you'd failed when you were succeeding beyond anything I could have imagined. I don't know how to make that right. I didn't know either. An apology couldn't give me back those years, couldn't undo the shame I'd felt at family gatherings or erase the loneliness of doing it all alone. But it was something. I don't know if you can make it right, I said finally. But maybe we could start over. Actually talk to each other this time. I'd like that. She sniffled. Would you come home for Thanksgiving? Let me cook for you? Let me celebrate what you've accomplished, even if it's years too late? I thought about it. Part of me wanted to say no, to hold on to my anger and my hurt. But another part of me missed having a mother, missed the possibility of a relationship that wasn't built on misunderstanding and silence. Okay, I said. Thanksgiving. Thank you, Madison. And honey? Yeah? I read the article 5 times. You mentioned the research you're doing on antibiotic resistance. Your father would have been so proud of you. I know I haven't said it in a way that matters, but I'm proud of you too. What you've done is extraordinary. The words still felt fragile, like they might shatter if I examined them too closely. But they were better than nothing. We hung up, and I sat in my quiet apartment, looking at the copy of the alumni magazine sitting on my coffee table. My face smiled back at me from the glossy cover, frozen in a moment of accomplishment. The vindication I thought I'd feel never quite materialized. I'd imagined this moment for years, the revelation, the shock, everyone realizing they'd underestimated me. I thought it would feel triumphant. Instead, it mostly felt sad. Sad for all the time we'd lost, for all the moments my mother could have been there but wasn't, for the version of our relationship that died with my father. But maybe there was room for something new. Maybe we could build something honest, even if it started from ruins. The next few months were awkward as we tried to reconstruct our relationship. My mother asked questions now, real ones, about my work and my life. She sent me articles about antibiotic research with little notes like "thought you'd find this interesting." She called every Sunday, and we'd talk for half an hour about nothing and everything. Thanksgiving came, and I went home. The house felt different somehow, lighter. She cooked all of my favorite foods, and we ate together at the table where my father used to sit. I framed the magazine article, she said, pointing to the wall. There it was, professionally framed and hanging in the living room where everyone could see it. Mom, that's embarrassing. It's my house, and I'll hang what I want. But she was smiling. Besides, I have 4 years of bragging to catch up on. That Christmas, she came to visit my apartment for the first time. She met my colleagues from Merrick, saw where I worked, asked intelligent questions about my research. She was trying, really trying, to understand my life. It wasn't perfect. We'd never get back what we'd lost. But it was real, and that counted for something. The Alumni magazine article took on a life of its own. State used it in their recruitment materials for the night program. I got emails from students thanking me for showing them it was possible. A scholarship fund was created in my father's name for non-traditional students facing financial hardship. My story became bigger than just my story. It became about all the students grinding through night classes, about everyone working impossible schedules to chase their dreams, about not giving up even when nobody's watching. But the most important thing it became was a bridge. A painful, complicated bridge that led my mother and me back to each other. She'll never fully understand what those 4 years cost me. She'll never know what it felt like to be so thoroughly unseen by the person who was supposed to see you most clearly. And I'll never completely let go of the hurt. But we're trying. And sometimes trying is enough. I still have that alumni magazine, though it's not framed on my wall. It's in a drawer in my office, along with my diploma and the ticket stub from graduation. Reminders of what I survived, what I accomplished, what I proved. I proved it mostly to myself, in the end. That was always who mattered most.